The crisp winter air cut through Willow Blake's threadbare coat as she clutched her most precious possession against her chest, a quilt that told her family's story in every carefully stitched pattern and faded piece of fabric. Desperation had brought her to Silvercreek, Colorado, in December of 1878, a town bustling with miners seeking fortune and settlers carving out lives on the untamed frontier. She had traveled for days, her wagon breaking down 5 miles outside of town, forcing her to trudge through the snow with only what she could carry. The quilt was the last thing she owned of any value, the final piece of her grandmother's legacy. But her empty stomach and the prospect of another night without shelter made hard choices necessary. Willow's fingers trembled as she approached the general store, its windows glowing with lantern light. The snow had begun falling again, delicate flakes catching in her chestnut hair as she pushed the door open. The bell jangled overhead, announcing her arrival to the handful of customers browsing the shelves. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the counter where a stern-faced older woman stood tallying figures in a ledger. "I was wondering if you might be interested in purchasing this quilt. It's handmade, every stitch done by my grandmother. The patterns are her own design." The shopkeeper barely glanced up. "We don't buy used goods, miss. Try the saloon down the way. Miners are always looking for trinkets to send home." Willow's heart sank, but she nodded her thanks and stepped back outside into the growing storm. The wind had picked up, driving the snow sideways as she made her way down the muddy Main Street toward the Silvercreek saloon. Each step felt heavier than the last, her pride battling with necessity. The saloon doors swung open just as she reached them, and a man stumbled out, nearly colliding with her. Willow jumped back, clutching the quilt tighter. "Pardon me, miss," he slurred, tipping his hat before continuing on his unsteady way. Willow hesitated at the entrance. She had never set foot in a saloon before. Such establishments weren't proper places for ladies, but desperation had a way of changing one's perspective on propriety. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the swinging doors. The warmth hit her first, along with the scent of whiskey, tobacco, and unwashed bodies. Piano music competed with raucous laughter and the clinking of glasses. Several heads turned in her direction, conversations momentarily halting at the sight of a young woman alone. She swallowed hard and approached the bar, where a heavy-set man with impressive mustaches was pouring drinks. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice barely audible above the noise. "I was wondering if anyone here might be interested in purchasing this quilt. It's very finely made." The bartender raised an eyebrow. "This ain't a general store, miss. We sell whiskey, not bedding." "Please," Willow said, unfolding a corner of the quilt to display the intricate patchwork. "I need the money for a place to stay tonight and something to eat. My wagon broke down outside of town, and like I said, we don't. How much are you asking for it?" The deep voice came from behind her. Willow turned to find herself looking up at a tall man leaning against the bar. His eyes were the color of a summer sky, startling against his sun-darkened skin. A leather vest hung open over a shirt that had once been white, and a worn cowboy hat sat atop hair the color of wheat fields. $3, Willow said, then quickly added, "But I would accept 2. The man studied her for a moment, then looked down at the quilt. He reached out a hand. "May I?" Willow nodded, reluctantly loosening her grip on the fabric. His fingers were calloused but gentle as he examined the stitching. "My grandmother taught me to quilt when I was a girl," Willow explained, unable to bear the silence. "She made this one for my mother's wedding. Every piece has a story. The blue there was from my grandfather's favorite shirt. The yellow floral print was my mother's childhood dress." The man's eyes met hers again, something unreadable in their depths. "It's beautiful work." He folded it carefully and handed it back to her. "But it doesn't belong here." Willow's shoulders slumped. Another rejection. "It belongs at the foot of our bed," he continued, his voice low enough that only she could hear. She blinked, certain she had misheard him. "I beg your pardon." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "The name's Levi Rawlins. I own a ranch about 10 miles outside of town. And I think we might be able to help each other out, Miss Blake." "Willow Blake," she replied automatically, still trying to process his words. "Miss Blake," he nodded. "You need a place to stay and a hot meal. I need a housekeeper. My last one left to get married 2 months ago, and the place is starting to look like a bear's den. What do you say to a job instead of selling your grandmother's quilt?" Willow stared at him. "You're offering me employment, just like that. You don't know anything about me. I know you're desperate enough to sell a family heirloom but proud enough to be honest about its worth. That tells me something about your character." He shrugged. "Besides, anyone who can make stitches that fine can probably cook better than I can, which isn't saying much. A job. A real job with a place to stay." It seemed too good to be true, which made Willow instantly suspicious. "What exactly would this position entail, Mr. Rawlins? Cooking, cleaning, mending, the usual household duties." "You'd have your own room in the house, meals provided, and I pay $5 a week." $5 a week was more than generous for such a position. Willow narrowed her eyes. "And what else would you expect of me?" Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like respect. "Nothing improper, Miss Blake. I'm offering you a job as a housekeeper, not anything else. You have my word on that." The bartender snorted. "Levi Rawlins is many things, miss, but he ain't a liar. If he gives his word, you can trust it." Willow looked between the two men, weighing her options. She had little choice. Her money was gone. Night was falling, and the storm was worsening. Still, the idea of going off alone with a stranger to his remote ranch set off warning bells. "Perhaps you have references in town. Someone who could vouch for your character," Levi chuckled. "Smart thinking. Doc Wilson's wife, Martha, can tell you all about me. She's likely at the boarding house now, serving dinner." "I see." Willow clutched the quilt tighter, thinking hard. "Mr. Rawlins, if you're serious about this offer, I would like to speak with Mrs. Wilson first. If she vouches for you, I'll accept the position." "Fair enough." He nodded, then glanced outside at the swirling snow. "Weather's getting worse. Let me buy you dinner at the boarding house while you talk to Martha. We can leave for the ranch in the morning when the storm passes." An hour later, Willow sat in the warm dining room of Mrs. Wilson's boarding house, a bowl of hot stew in front of her and the quilt safely beside her on the bench. Levi Rawlins had excused himself after introducing her to Martha Wilson, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s who immediately took Willow under her wing. "So, you're considering working for our Levi," Martha said, refilling Willow's coffee cup. "You couldn't find a better employer, dear. He's as honest as the day is long." "You know him well?" Willow asked, savoring the rich stew. "Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His parents homesteaded here 20 years ago. Good people, God rest their souls." Martha sat down across from her. "Levi inherited the ranch when his father passed 5 years back. Works hard, that one. Built it into one of the most successful operations in the county. He lives alone," Martha nodded. "Just him and his ranch hands, though they stay in the bunkhouse. Had a housekeeper, Mrs. Tanner, but her daughter had a baby out California way, so off she went." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Half the unmarried women in town have set their caps for him, but he keeps to himself mostly, focused on building his ranch. And you trust him, completely." "With my life," Martha said without hesitation. "My Edward, that's Dr. Wilson, pulled Levi's younger brother through scarlet fever when no one thought he'd make it. Levi's never forgotten, Been like family ever since. He has a brother, Luke. Lives over in Denver now with his wife. Visits a few times a year. Martha patted Willow's hand. You take the job, dear. Levi Rawlins is a good man. Bit rough around the edges, keeps his feelings close to the vest, but his heart's in the right place. Willow nodded slowly, her decision made. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson, I believe I will. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having passed during the night, leaving the world blanketed in pristine white. Willow had slept better than she had in weeks, knowing she had a position waiting and wouldn't have to part with her grandmother's quilt. Levi arrived at the boarding house just after breakfast, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by two dappled gray horses. He helped Willow up onto the seat, handling her small carpet bag and precious quilt with care. Not much luggage, he commented as he climbed up beside her. Most of my belongings were in my wagon, Willow explained. It broke an axle outside town. I could only carry what was most important. We'll send someone to fetch it once we get to the ranch, Levi promised, flicking the reins to set the horses in motion. The journey to the Rawlins ranch took most of the morning, the wagon moving slowly through the snow-covered landscape. Conversation between them came in fits and starts. Neither seemed particularly skilled at small talk. Willow learned that Levi had served briefly in the army before returning to Colorado to help his ailing father with the ranch. In turn, she told him about growing up in Missouri, where her father had been a schoolteacher until his death from pneumonia 2 years earlier. What brings you to Colorado? Levi asked as they crested a hill, revealing a sweeping vista of pine-covered mountains. Willow hesitated, uncertain how much to share. My mother passed last spring. There was nothing left for me in Missouri, and I had heard that opportunities out west were plentiful. She didn't mention Thomas, the man she'd been engaged to, who had broken their engagement after her father's death when it became clear the Blake family had little money left. That wound was still too fresh. Sorry to hear about your parents, Levi said simply. Thank you. Willow pulled her coat tighter around her. What about your family? Mrs. Wilson mentioned a brother in Denver, Luke. He's a lawyer. There was pride in Levi's voice. Smart as a whip. Always had his nose in a book growing up. Used to drive our father crazy. He wanted Luke to take to ranching, but it wasn't in his blood. And your mother died when I was 16, childbirth. The baby didn't make it either. I'm sorry, Willow said softly. Levi nodded, his jaw tight. It was a long time ago. They fell silent again, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves. Eventually, Levi pointed to a distant cluster of buildings nestled in a protected valley. That's home, he said. As they drew closer, Willow could make out a large 2-story house built of solid timber, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings, including a barn and what appeared to be a bunkhouse, stood nearby. Smoke curled from the chimney of the main house, and even from a distance, Willow could see it was an impressive operation. It's beautiful, she said honestly. Levi's expression softened with pride. My father built the original cabin. I added on as the ranch grew. 15,000 acres now, and nearly 800 head of cattle. He guided the wagon up to the house, where a young ranch hand rushed to help with the horses. Levi jumped down and then reached up to assist Willow, his strong hand spanning her waist as he lifted her effortlessly to the ground. Diego, this is Miss Blake, our new housekeeper, Levi said to the young man. Miss Blake, Diego Rodriguez, best hand with horses in 3 counties. Diego tipped his hat politely. Pleased to meet you, Miss Blake. Likewise, Willow replied with a smile. Diego, Miss Blake's wagon broke down about 5 miles east of town, Levi continued. When you've seen to the horses, take Jones and go retrieve her belongings. You might need to bring the wagon back in pieces if the axle's broken bad." "Yes, sir. We'll head out right away." Levi nodded his thanks, then guided Willow up the steps to the house. "It's not fancy," he warned as he opened the door, "but it's solid and warm." The interior was indeed warm, thanks to a large fire burning in the stone fireplace that dominated one wall of the main room. The space was comfortably furnished with sturdy, handcrafted pieces, a large table with 8 chairs, a leather sofa and several armchairs arranged around the fireplace, and bookshelves built into the walls, surprisingly well stocked. What the room lacked was a woman's touch. No curtains hung at the windows, no pictures adorned the walls, and a fine layer of dust covered most surfaces. Dishes were stacked haphazardly on the kitchen table, and Willow spotted at least 3 coffee cups on various surfaces. "As you can see," Levi said, following her gaze, "I wasn't exaggerating about needing a housekeeper." Willow suppressed a smile. "I've seen worse. Your room is upstairs, first door on the left, has its own small stove for heat. Bathrooms at the end of the hall, we've got running water pumped in from the well. It's cold, but you can heat it on the stove." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking uncertain. "I'll let you get settled. Take today to rest and get your bearings. You can start your duties tomorrow." "Thank you, Mr. Rawlins. That's very kind." "Levi," he corrected. "If we're going to be sharing a house, might as well use first names." "Levi," Willow agreed, testing the name. "Then you must call me Willow." A half smile lifted one corner of his mouth. "Willow it is. I need to check on some things in the barn. Make yourself at home." After he left, Willow explored the house, starting with her new room. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a small writing desk, but it was clean and cozy. The window overlooked the mountains to the west, providing a spectacular view. The rest of the house consisted of 4 more bedrooms upstairs, including Levi's master bedroom at the end of the hall opposite the bathroom, and the large open living area downstairs with its attached kitchen. A small study off the main room contained a desk piled high with ledgers and ranch correspondence. By the time Levi returned for the evening meal, Willow had swept the floors, dusted the furniture, and prepared a simple supper from the supplies she found in the pantry. The transformation wasn't dramatic, but the house already felt more welcoming. "You didn't have to start work today," Levi said as he hung his hat and coat by the door. "I wanted to," Willow replied from where she stood at the stove. "Besides, I needed to familiarize myself with the kitchen to prepare dinner. Something smells good. Just beef stew and biscuits. Your pantry is well stocked, but I'll need to make a list of additional supplies." They ate at the kitchen table, the conversation sparse but not uncomfortable. Afterward, Levi insisted on helping with the dishes, which surprised Willow. "My mother would haunt me if I let a lady clean up alone," he explained when she protested. As they worked side by side, Willow stealing glances at his profile, she realized she knew very little about this man who had so unexpectedly changed the course of her life. He was taciturn, to be sure, but there was kindness in his actions, and his eyes held a depth of feeling that his words rarely expressed. "Why did you really offer me this position?" she asked suddenly, passing him a plate to dry. "There must be plenty of women in town who would jump at the chance." Levi's hands stilled for a moment. "There are," he admitted, "but most of them see the ranch, not me. They see a comfortable house and financial security." He shrugged. "When I saw you about to sell that quilt, something that obviously meant a great deal to you, I recognized something." "What?" "Someone who values the things that can't be replaced over comfort. Someone who understands that some possessions carry more than monetary worth." He set the dried plate aside. "My father built this ranch from nothing, worked himself to the bone for it. I understand what it means to cherish something that carries the weight of family history." Willow stared at him, startled by the insight. "I see. Besides," he added, his tone lightening, "anyone willing to trek across the country alone has the kind of spirit it takes to survive out here." That night, as Willow settled into her new bed with her grandmother's quilt spread over her, she reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. A week ago, she had been traveling west with no clear destination, only the vague hope of finding a place to belong after losing everything and everyone she loved. Now she had a position, a roof over her head, and the beginnings of what might become a home. The man sleeping down the hall remained a mystery, part rugged cowboy, part thoughtful gentleman. She would need to be careful around Levi Rawlins, Willow decided. Not because she feared him, but because there was something about those blue eyes that made her heart beat a little faster than was proper for a relationship between employer and housekeeper. Winter settled in earnest over the next few weeks, blanketing the ranch in snow and limiting activity largely to essential chores. Willow quickly fell into the rhythm of ranch life, rising before dawn to prepare breakfast for Levi and the 5 ranch hands who worked through the winter months. The men would come in stomping snow from their boots, their faces red with cold, grateful for the hot coffee and hearty food she provided. After breakfast, she would turn to household chores, cleaning, mending Levi's clothes, baking bread, and preparing the midday and evening meals. In the afternoons, when daylight was already fading, she often found herself in the main room with a sewing project while Levi worked on ranch accounts at the large table. They developed an easy companionship, conversations growing more natural as they became accustomed to each other's presence. Willow learned that beneath Levi's reserved exterior was a man of surprising depths. He read voraciously, everything from poetry to scientific journals that arrived months late by post. He played chess, taught himself to play the battered piano in the corner of the main room, and carved intricate wooden figures in the evenings by the fire. For his part, Levi discovered that his new housekeeper had a quick mind and sharp wit when she felt comfortable enough to reveal them. She had been educated by her schoolteacher father and could discuss literature, history, and even politics with surprising insight. She sang while she worked, her clear voice filling the house with old folk tunes and hymns that reminded him of his mother. One evening in late January, as a blizzard howled outside, they sat by the fire after dinner. Levi was whittling a small wooden horse while Willow mended one of his shirts. The comfortable silence was broken only by the crackling of the fire and the occasional howl of wind. "May I ask you something personal?" Levi said suddenly, looking up from his carving. Willow's hand stilled. "You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "Fair enough. I was wondering why a woman like you, educated, capable, would travel west alone. Most women come with husbands or family or to meet a husband." Willow kept her eyes on her stitching. "As I told you, there was nothing left for me in Missouri after my mother died." "Was there no one who wanted you to stay?" She hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "There was a man. We were engaged to be married." Levi's knife paused. "What happened?" "My father's illness lasted nearly a year before he died. The medical expenses took most of our savings. When Thomas, my fiancé, realized I would bring little to the marriage besides debts, his ardor cooled considerably." She forced lightness into her tone. "He found another young lady whose father owned the largest general store in town, a much more prudent match." "He sounds like a fool," Levi said flatly. Willow looked up, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. "Any man who would throw away a chance at happiness over money is a fool," he continued, his blue eyes intense in the firelight. What good is wealth if you share it with someone you don't love? Many would consider him sensible, Willow countered, though her heart warmed at his defense. Marriage is as much a practical arrangement as a romantic one. Maybe. Levi returned to his carving, his movements more forceful than before. But I'd rather have a woman who would stand by me through hard times than one who only saw the size of my herd. They lapsed into silence again, but something had shifted between them. Willow found herself sneaking glances at Levi, seeing him with new eyes. The firelight cast his features in a warm glow, softening the lines that the harsh sun and hard work had etched into his face. Despite the rugged exterior, there was a gentleness to his hands as they shaped the wood, a sensitivity she hadn't expected in a man who spent his days wrestling cattle and battling the elements. Later that night, as she lay in bed listening to the storm, Willow acknowledged the dangerous territory her thoughts were entering. Levi Rawlins was her employer, not a potential suitor. His kindness was that of a decent man, nothing more. She couldn't afford to read romance into simple friendship, not when her position and reputation depended on maintaining proper boundaries. Still, as sleep claimed her, she couldn't help but remember the way his eyes had flashed when he called Thomas a fool, or the quiet intensity in his voice when he spoke of choosing love over practical considerations. The blizzard kept them housebound for 3 days, during which time the tenuous boundaries Willow had tried to maintain began to blur further. With outdoor work impossible, Levi remained in the house, helping her with indoor chores, teaching her to play chess by the fire and sharing stories of his childhood on the ranch. On the 3rd evening, restless from confinement, Levi suggested they clear a space in the main room. For what? Willow asked, looking up from the bread dough she was kneading. Dancing, he replied with a small smile. My mother always said dancing was the best cure for cabin fever. Willow laughed. Dancing, just the two of us. Unless you'd prefer to invite the cows. He was already moving the table against the wall. Come on. Once you're done with that dough, I'll show you how we used to pass the time during winter storms when I was growing up. An hour later, the furniture pushed to the edges of the room and the lamps turned low. Levi cranked up the Victrola he'd brought down from the attic. The scratchy strains of a waltz filled the room, and he turned to Willow with an exaggerated bow. May I have this dance, Miss Blake? She should have refused. It was improper, this intimate moment in the dim light with no chaperone for miles. But the playful light in his eyes and the extended hand proved impossible to resist. You may, Mr. Rawlins, she replied with a curtsy, placing her hand in his. His arm circled her waist, keeping a respectful distance between them as they began to move around the cleared space. Levi proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer for a man who spent most of his time on horseback. Where did you learn to dance like this? Willow asked, following his lead. My mother insisted both Luke and I learn, said no son of hers would stand against the wall at socials like a fence post. His smile turned wistful. She was quite the dancer herself. My father used to say he fell in love with her at a barn dance before he even knew her name. They must have been very happy together. They were. His hand tightened slightly on her waist. They had their struggles, drought years, harsh winters, all the hardships of building a life out here, but I never once saw them regret choosing each other. The music changed to a livelier tune, and Levi spun her, drawing a laugh from Willow as her skirts flared out. As they continued dancing, song after song, the proper distance between them gradually diminished until she could feel the warmth of his body and catch the scent of pine and leather that seemed to cling to him. When the last notes of a particularly spirited reel faded, they stood breathless and laughing in the middle of the room. Levi's hands remained at her waist, and Willow's rested lightly on his shoulders. Their eyes met, and the laughter faded, replaced by something deeper and more dangerous. For one heart-stopping moment, Willow thought he might kiss her. His gaze dropped to her lips, and she felt herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by a force as inexorable as gravity. Then the grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9, breaking the spell. Levi stepped back, his hands falling to his sides. "It's getting late," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Thank you for the dance, Willow." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly unsure what to do with her hands. "It was lovely," he nodded, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "I should check on the livestock one more time before turning in. Good night." Before she could respond, he had grabbed his coat and was out the door, leaving Willow standing alone in the middle of the room, her heart pounding as if she'd run a mile. That night, lying awake in her bed, Willow admitted the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with Levi Rawlins. The realization brought both joy and despair. Joy because she had never felt this way before, not even with Thomas. Despair because nothing could come of it. She was his employee, dependent on him for her livelihood. Even if he felt something for her, and the look in his eyes during their dance suggested he might acting on those feelings would compromise her position and reputation. Willow pressed her hands against her eyes, willing away the tears that threatened. She had been foolish to let her guard down, to forget the boundaries that needed to exist between them. Tomorrow, she resolved, she would be the perfect housekeeper, efficient, friendly but professionally distant. No more intimate conversations by the fire, no more dancing in the lamplight. It was the only way to protect her heart and her future. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world outside transformed into a glittering wonderland of snow-covered pines and pristine white fields. The ranch hands, eager after days of confinement, set out early to check on the cattle herds sheltering in the protected valleys. Levi left with them, returning only briefly at midday for a quick meal before heading out again. His manner was polite but reserved, suggesting he too had recognized the dangerous direction their relationship had been heading. Willow told herself this was for the best, even as she felt a hollow ache in her chest at the distance between them. February arrived with a brief thaw that turned the ranch into a muddy mess, before another cold snap froze everything solid again. The work never ceased. Cattle needed tending regardless of weather, and the isolated location of the ranch meant they had to be largely self-sufficient during the winter months. Willow threw herself into her duties, finding satisfaction in transforming the house into a true home. She sewed curtains for the windows from fabric ordered from the general store in town, hung pictures she found in a trunk in the attic, and arranged Levi's books more artfully on the shelves. She experimented with new recipes, delighting in the ranch hands' enthusiastic appreciation, and kept the house spotlessly clean. If she sometimes caught Levi watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch, she pretended not to notice. If her heart still raced when their hands accidentally touched as she passed him a plate at dinner, she ignored it. They maintained a cordial, friendly relationship, but the easy intimacy of those blizzard days was carefully avoided. Then, in the last week of February, everything changed. Willow was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Diego burst through the door, his face grave. "Miss Blake, is the boss here?" "No, he rode out to the north pasture this morning," she replied, alarmed by his expression. "What's wrong, cattle rustlers?" "They hit the Jackson place last night, took nearly 50 head. Mr. Jackson's in town now, organizing a posse. Said the tracks are heading this way." Willow's hand flew to her throat. "Do you think they'll try to steal from the ranch?" "Could be. We've got the biggest herd in the county." "I need to warn the boss and get the men ready." He hesitated. "Miss Blake, if there's trouble, you stay in the house, you hear. Lock the doors and keep away from the windows." She nodded, fear coiling in her stomach. "Be careful, Diego." After he left, Willow tried to continue with dinner preparations, but her hands shook so badly she had to set down the knife she was using. Cattle rustling was no minor crime in ranch country. Men died over stolen herds, and rustlers, if caught, often faced frontier justice at the end of a rope. The hours dragged by with agonizing slowness. Willow jumped at every sound, peering anxiously out the windows for any sign of Levi or the ranch hands returning. As darkness fell, her worry intensified. He should have been back by now. Just as she was considering saddling a horse herself to go looking for him, a foolish notion given her limited riding experience and the dangerous situation, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Relief flooded through her as she rushed to the window, only to freeze at the sight that greeted her. 3 men, none of whom she recognized, were riding toward the house. Their faces were obscured by bandanas pulled up over their noses, and even from a distance, she could see they were armed. Remembering Diego's warning, Willow quickly moved away from the window and locked the front door. Her heart pounding, she rushed to secure the back door as well, then grabbed the rifle Levi kept mounted above the fireplace. She had never fired a gun before, but the men approaching the house wouldn't know that. A heavy knock rattled the front door. "Hello, the house. Anybody home?" Willow remained silent, the rifle clutched in trembling hands. "We know someone's in there, saw the smoke from the chimney," the voice called again. "We don't mean no harm, just need a place to warm up and maybe some food. Our horses are about done in." Still, Willow made no sound, positioning herself where she could see the door but wouldn't be visible from the windows. "Listen, lady," the voice took on a harder edge. "We saw you at the window. Open up, or we'll break the door down." Swallowing hard, Willow called out, "My husband and the ranch hands will be back any minute. They're armed and they don't take kindly to trespassers." A laugh reached her ears. "Your husband, huh? That would be Rawlins. Word in town is he ain't married. Now open this door before we lose our patience." The man punctuated his demand with a solid kick to the door that made the wood groan. Willow's finger trembled on the trigger of the rifle. If they broke in, what would she do? Could she actually shoot someone? The sound of more horses approaching offered a moment of hope. Perhaps Levi was returning. But that hope died as she heard one of the men outside call out a greeting, suggesting these were companions, not rescuers. The door shuddered under another powerful kick, and Willow heard wood splintering. One more blow would likely break it open. Desperate, she fired the rifle into the ceiling, hoping the sound might scare them off. "Next shot goes through the door," she shouted, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've got 6 more rounds and I'm a good shot." This was met with laughter. "No, you ain't, or you'd have aimed at us, not your own ceiling. Last chance, lady. Open up." Or the rest of his threat was cut off by the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being cocked. "Step away from my door." Levi's voice, cold as ice and hard as steel, carried clearly through the night air. From her position, Willow couldn't see what was happening outside, but the sudden silence suggested the intruders were as surprised as she was by Levi's arrival. "Rawlins," one of them finally said, "didn't expect you back so soon. Clearly. Now back away from the house, all of you." Diego, Jones, keep them covered. Relief washed over Willow at the knowledge that Levi wasn't alone. She heard the shuffle of feet moving away from the door, followed by tense conversation too low for her to make out. After what seemed an eternity, there was a gentle knock. "Willow, it's me." "Open the door." With shaking hands, she set the rifle aside and unlocked the door. Levi stood on the porch, shotgun in one hand, his expression a mixture of concern and tightly controlled anger. Behind him, she could see Diego and another ranch hand holding 3 men at gunpoint, while more riders approached from the direction of the bunkhouse. "Are you all right?" Levi asked, his eyes quickly scanning her for injury. Willow nodded, relief making her knees weak. "I'm fine. They didn't get in. Thank God." His voice was rough with emotion. He turned back to the men under guard. "Take them to the bunkhouse and tie them up. The sheriff should be along with the posse before morning and find out where they've hidden our cattle." As Diego and the others led the rustlers away, Levi stepped into the house, closing the door behind him. Without a word, he set the shotgun aside and pulled Willow into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. She went willingly, her own arms wrapping around his waist, face pressed against the rough fabric of his coat. She could hear his heart pounding, feel the slight tremor in his hands as they moved to cradle her head. When we saw their horses outside. His voice trailed off and he tightened his hold on her. "I thought I'm all right," she assured him, pulling back slightly to look up at his face. "Truly." Levi's eyes searched hers, then dropped to her lips. This time there was no clock to interrupt, no reason to step away. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull back, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. Willow answered by rising on her toes, her hands sliding up to his shoulders as the kiss deepened. All the feelings she had tried so hard to suppress these past weeks poured out, leaving her breathless and trembling when they finally parted. "I've wanted to do that since the night we danced," Levi confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "So have I," Willow admitted. He smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his face. "I tried to keep my distance, didn't want you to think I'd offered you the job with expectations. I know." She touched his cheek, feeling the scratch of stubble beneath her fingers. "You've been a perfect gentleman." "Not in my thoughts," he said ruefully. A blush warmed her cheeks at his honesty. Levi, whatever she had been about to say, was interrupted by a knock at the door. Reluctantly, they stepped apart. "Boss," Diego called. "Sheriff's here early. Says they caught the rest of the gang trying to move the stolen cattle across the county line." Levi sighed, his eyes still on Willow. "Tell him I'll be right there." After Diego's footsteps retreated, Levi took Willow's hands in his. "We need to talk about what happens next. But it'll have to wait until this business with the rustlers is settled." She nodded her understanding. "Go. I'll have hot coffee and food waiting when you're done." He pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. "You're an extraordinary woman, Willow Blake." After he left, Willow stood in the middle of the room, her fingers touching her lips in wonder. Everything had changed in an instant. The professional distance she had tried so hard to maintain had evaporated with that kiss, and there was no going back now. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The aftermath of the rustler incident kept Levi busy for several days. The sheriff arrested the men, recovering most of the stolen cattle not only from the Rawlins ranch but from several neighboring properties as well. As the largest rancher in the area, Levi was called to testify at their preliminary hearing in town, requiring him to be away from the ranch for 2 nights. In his absence, Willow found herself both anticipating and dreading his return. The kiss they had shared seemed almost dreamlike now, a product of heightened emotions and relief. What if, in the clear light of day, Levi regretted it? What if he felt obligated to her now, trapped by a moment of impulse? When he finally returned, dust-covered and weary from the hard ride, Willow had dinner waiting. They ate mostly in silence, the presence of 2 ranch hands who had accompanied him making private conversation impossible. It wasn't until later, when the house was quiet and they sat alone by the fire, that Levi finally spoke of what had happened between them. "I meant what I said before I left," he began, his eyes serious in the firelight. "You are extraordinary, Willow. And what happened wasn't just because of the danger or relief that you were safe." She looked down at her hands, folded tightly in her lap. "You don't owe me any explanations, Levi." "Yes, I do." He moved from his chair to kneel in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Because I'm about to complicate your life considerably, and you deserve to know why." Willow's heart began to race. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I've fallen in love with you." The words were simple, direct, like the man himself. "I didn't plan to, tried my damnedest not to, in fact." "But there it is." Her breath caught. "Levi, let me finish," he said gently. "I know this puts you in an impossible position. You work for me. You depend on this job. The last thing I want is for you to feel pressured or obligated." He squeezed her hands. "So I need you to know that whatever you decide, whether you feel the same or not, your position here is secure. Nothing has to change if you don't want it to." Tears welled in Willow's eyes at his consideration. This was so different from Thomas's abandonment when circumstances changed. Here was a man offering his heart with no demands, no conditions, just honest feeling and respect for her choices. "And if I do want things to change," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hope flared in his eyes. "Then they will. In whatever way makes you happy." Willow slipped one hand free to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I've fallen in love with you too, Levi Rawlins. I tried not to. I told myself it was foolish and improper and unlikely to end well." She smiled through her tears. "But my heart wouldn't listen." The joy that transformed his face was worth every moment of doubt and hesitation. Levi rose, drawing her up with him into his arms. "Marry me," he said, the words more statement than question. Willow laughed softly. "That's rather sudden, isn't it?" "No." He shook his head. "I've known since the day you stood in that saloon, refusing to part with your grandmother's quilt for less than it was worth. I've known in every conversation, every meal shared, every moment of watching you turn this house into a home." His hands framed her face. "I love you, Willow Blake. Marry me and make this place truly ours." Looking into his eyes, Willow saw their future unfold, mornings waking beside him, children running through the house, growing old together on this land he loved so deeply. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself when she headed west, but it was infinitely better than anything she could have dreamed. "Yes," she said simply, "I'll marry you." His kiss was tender and passionate all at once, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally parted, both breathless, Levi rested his forehead against hers. "There's something I need to show you," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Wait here." He disappeared upstairs, returning moments later with a familiar bundle in his arms, her grandmother's quilt. "I've been keeping it in my room," he admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. "The day you arrived, when I said it belonged at the foot of our bed, I meant it even then. Something about you, about this quilt and what it represented, I knew you were meant to be here." Tears spilled down Willow's cheeks as he unfolded the quilt, revealing the patterns her grandmother had so lovingly created. In that moment, she felt as though her family was somehow present, blessing this unexpected happiness. "It's where it belongs," she agreed softly, "at the foot of our bed." Spring arrived early that year, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the soil. As the land awakened from its winter slumber, preparations for the wedding consumed the ranch. Levi insisted they wait until his brother Luke could travel from Denver with his wife, but otherwise was content to let Willow plan the celebration as she wished. Word spread quickly through the county that the eligible Levi Rawlins was finally to be married, causing a flurry of speculation about the woman who had captured his heart. Martha Wilson, delighted by the news, appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, bringing half the ladies from town to help with preparations. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in April, to be held on the ranch itself. A white canvas tent was erected near the house, decorated with early spring flowers and ribbons. Guests would arrive from as far as Denver and Boulder, including the county judge who would perform the ceremony. As the day approached, Willow found herself increasingly nervous, not about marrying Levi, of that she was certain, but about meeting his brother and sister-in-law, about becoming the mistress of such a significant ranch, about living up to the responsibilities that would come with being Mrs. Rawlins. "What if they don't approve of me?" she asked Levi the night before Luke was due to arrive. "Your brother is a lawyer, his wife from a good Denver family. I'm just a schoolteacher's daughter who arrived with nothing but a quilt to her name." Levi pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Luke will love you because I love you, and because he's got sense enough to recognize a remarkable woman when he meets one." His eyes twinkled with mischief. "Besides, Clara, his wife, comes from money, it's true, but she scandalized all of Denver society by working as a newspaper reporter before they married. She's hardly one to stand on ceremony." His words proved prophetic. Luke Rawlins arrived the next day, a leaner, scholarly version of his brother with the same wheat-blonde hair and blue eyes. His wife Clara, a vivacious brunette with intelligent eyes and a ready laugh, embraced Willow immediately. "Thank God Levi finally found a woman with sense enough to take him on," she declared, linking her arm through Willow's. "I was beginning to think we'd have to import a bride from back east who didn't know any better." Levi groaned. "5 minutes, Clara." "You couldn't give me 5 minutes before starting." Luke laughed, clapping his brother on the shoulder. "You knew what you were getting into when you asked us to come." He turned to Willow with a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to meet the woman brave enough to become a Rawlins. The family legend says we're all stubborn as mules and twice as hard-headed." "I've noticed," Willow replied with a smile, relaxing into the easy camaraderie of this family that was soon to be hers. The day of the wedding dawned clear and mild, as if nature itself approved of the union. Willow dressed in the simple white gown she and Martha had made, adorned with lace ordered specially from Denver. As Clara helped her with the tiny buttons up the back, Willow caught sight of her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Gone was the desperate young woman who had trudged into Silvercreek months ago, replaced by a bride with flushed cheeks and eyes bright with happiness. "You look beautiful," Clara said, adjusting the small wreath of wildflowers in Willow's hair. "Levi won't know what hit him." A knock at the door preceded Martha Wilson's entrance. "It's time, dear. Everyone's ready." Her eyes misted as she took in Willow's appearance. "Oh my, you are a vision." Willow took a deep breath, smoothing her hands over the skirt of her gown. "I'm ready." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Willow would later remember fragments the look of wonder on Levi's face as she walked toward him on Luke's arm, the gentle pressure of his hands holding hers as they spoke their vows, the cheer that went up from the assembled guests when the judge pronounced them husband and wife, and the tender kiss that sealed their union. The celebration continued well into the evening with dancing and feasting under the stars. As night fell, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Levi kept Willow close, introducing her proudly to neighbors and friends as "my wife," the words clearly a source of joy each time he spoke them. During a lull in the dancing, they found a moment alone, stepping away from the tent to look out over the ranch that was now truly their shared home. "Happy, Mrs. Rawlins?" Levi asked, his arm around her waist, completely. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Though I still can't quite believe it's real. 6 months ago I had nothing, not even hope. Now." She gestured to the celebration behind them, to the house glowing with lamplight, to the vast expanse of land stretching out before them. Now I have everything. Levi turned her to face him, his expression serious in the moonlight. You gave me everything, Willow. This was just land and buildings before you came. You made it a home. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I thank God every day that you walked into that saloon with your grandmother's quilt. So do I, she whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the ranch was quiet, they stood together in the master bedroom that was now theirs to share. At the foot of the bed, Willow's grandmother's quilt was spread, its colors rich in the soft lamplight. It's right where it belongs, Levi said, slipping his arms around her from behind. Willow leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Yes, it is, and so am I. 5 years later, on a warm summer evening, Willow sat on the front porch of the Rawlins ranch house, her hands busy with a familiar task, quilting. Beside her, Levi gently rocked their youngest child, 3-month-old Emma, while their 3-year-old son James played with wooden blocks at their feet. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. The herd had grown, as had their reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. The house had expanded too, with additional rooms built to accommodate their growing family and frequent visits from Luke, Clara, and their twin daughters. What pattern is that one going to be? Levi asked, nodding toward the quilt spread across her lap. A variation on grandmother's star pattern, Willow replied, her needle flashing in the evening light. I'm making it for James's big boy bed. Mama, stars. James exclaimed, abandoning his blocks to climb into her lap and examine the colorful fabric pieces. Willow laughed, setting aside her needle to embrace her son. Yes, sweetheart, stars for my little star. Levi watched them with a smile, his free hand reaching out to touch the quilt that had started it all, now slightly faded but still proudly displayed on their bed. You know, I've been thinking. A dangerous pastime, Willow teased, earning a mock scowl from her husband. I'm serious. I've been thinking about expanding the house again. Adding a proper sewing room for you with big windows for the light, maybe a small library too. Willow raised an eyebrow. Are you planning to build a mansion, Mr. Rawlins? Not a mansion, just a home that grows with us. He looked down at the sleeping infant in his arms, then at James, who had returned to his blocks. Room for more children if we're blessed with them. Room for all your quilts and my books. Room for the life we're building. Warmth spread through Willow's chest at his words. 5 years of marriage had only deepened her love for this man who had saved her from desperation and given her a home, a family, and a future. I think that sounds wonderful, she said softly. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Willow Blake Rawlins looked at the life she had found in this wild, beautiful place. From a desperate young woman with nothing but a quilt and fading hope, she had become a wife, a mother, a respected member of the community, and the beloved partner of a good man. The quilt that had brought them together was more than just fabric and thread. It was a symbol of family history, of things valued beyond their practical worth, of connections that endured across generations. Just as her grandmother had stitched together disparate pieces to create something beautiful and lasting, Willow and Levi had woven their separate lives into a shared future, rich with love and possibility. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Levi reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of deep love. No words were needed between them in that moment, just the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they belonged, together under the vast western sky, their story still unfolding with each passing day. In the years that followed, the Rawlins ranch prospered beyond even Levi's ambitious dreams. Their family grew with the addition of twin boys, Samuel and William, born 2 years after Emma. The house expanded accordingly, becoming known throughout the county for its warmth and hospitality. Willow's quilts gained renown as well. What had begun as a practical skill passed down from her grandmother evolved into a true art form. She taught quilting to local women, organizing gatherings that became both social events and opportunities for creative expression. Each Christmas, she gifted a quilt to a family in need, remembering her own desperate times and the kindness that had changed her life. Levi served on the county council, his fair-mindedness and integrity making him a respected voice in local governance. Together, he and Willow helped establish the area's first proper school, with Willow occasionally serving as a substitute teacher, honoring her father's legacy. Their children grew strong and confident, raised with both the practical skills needed for ranch life and the education their parents valued so highly. James, their firstborn, showed his father's aptitude for ranching from an early age. Emma, their daughter, inherited Willow's artistic eye and deft hands. The twins, different as day and night despite their identical appearance, found their own paths. Samuel drawn to books and learning like his uncle Luke, William to the open range and wild horses. Through it all, the quilt that had first brought them together held a place of honor in their home, a tangible reminder of how love could transform loss into beginning, desperation into hope, strangers into family. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their grown children, grandchildren, and friends from across the county, Levi presented Willow with a gift, a glass display case he had commissioned from a craftsman in Denver, designed specifically to preserve and showcase her grandmother's quilt when it wasn't in use. "So it will last another 100 years," he explained as tears filled her eyes. "So our grandchildren's grandchildren will know the story of the woman who wouldn't sell her quilt for less than it was worth, and the cowboy who knew exactly where it belonged." Willow's legacy lived on not just in the quilt she created, but in the home and family she and Levi built together, pieces of different lives and dreams, stitched together with love and respect, creating a pattern more beautiful than either could have imagined alone. And at the heart of it all remained the simple truth that had changed everything. Some treasures are worth more than gold, and true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in whom we love.